get really clear about what you mean by sustainability for you. And that will vary from business to business, from industry to industry, from person to person. And so when we say, I want to be more sustainable, I want to do better for the world and the planet, what does that actually mean specifically? Like, what problems are you noticing that you want to address? So specificity is really important to feeling like you're actually making a difference.
This is Evolve CPG, a community of purpose-driven brand leaders who not only believe in better, but actively pursue it. That's better products, better brands, and better leadership for a better world. You can join our online community right now, where we're going further, faster together at community.evolvecpg.com. Join us. I'm your host, Gage Mitchell, founder and creative director of Modern Species, a sustainable brand design agency helping better brands grow and scale their impact. On this episode, we're speaking with Moji Igun, founder of Blue Daisi Consulting, about the importance of figuring out what sustainability means to you and how she's helping companies find their path to zero waste.
Hi, my name is Moji. I am the founder of Blue Daisi Consulting, which is a sustainability consulting company that focuses on zero waste. So basically what we do is we help our clients find creative ways to reduce waste, and all of that is done in pursuit of a more sustainable, equitable, and just world.
Awesome. I love it. I'm super excited to have you on the podcast, Moji. You've been following your work for a little while and love what you're doing. So I want to share it with the world and maybe inspire them or inform them or whatever else. But before we get to what you're doing now, I was poking around on your LinkedIn and noticed you kind of, maybe it wasn't your first job, but early in your career, you went to AmeriCorps, which is, well, first of all, for people who don't know what it is, tell us what that's all about. And then I'm just curious, like what you like about teaching.
Yeah, so it's a national volunteer program, kind of facilitated by AmeriCorps, and the program I did specifically was called City Year. And so I am from the Midwest, so I moved from outside of Detroit to Milwaukee, and I worked with ninth graders in a public high school, working with math and science. And honestly, one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in my life. Leading up to that, I guess I'll explain how I got there, which is probably helpful. So I studied mechanical engineering in college. I had always wanted to be an engineer since I was like a little kid. I was into rockets and cars and robots and that kind of stuff. And so it was a natural progression for me to study engineering in college. And then about senior year, I started having, I think it's very common, but an existential crisis about what I was doing after college. And so I started going to career fairs and all those like informational sessions for companies that come to your campus. And I just realized like halfway through my time in college that I wasn't excited about any of the options that were kind of being laid out for me. And so it was very stressful at the time, but honestly, a really great redirection, because I realized that I needed to just really think about what I wanted to spend my days doing, like what I actually was excited about, instead of just kind of doing what I was supposed to do as my next step. And so that's what led me to AmeriCorps. Was I didn't like any of the engineering companies that were coming to campus. So I was like, what would I rather do instead? And at that time, I had had several years of tutoring through this program called Kumon, which is like an extracurricular like math and science, math and reading, tutoring support. And so I had been doing Kumon as a kid. I was a tutor for Kumon. I had worked for them for several years. And I realized that I loved teaching. I love taking anything that I get nerdy or passionate about, or I'm really curious about, and teaching it to somebody else and just talking about it. And so it was perfect to work with high schoolers through City Year and just talk about, we had algebra, we had earth science, we had a little bit of physics for some of the older students. But just talking about things that I cared about and making them equally excited is like one of my favorite things to do.
That's super cool. Yeah. I love how when I'm asking people about their background, often it like starts with some story from their youth of like, oh, I really wanted to do this when I grew up. And it's fun to see that some people end up going into exactly what they imagined when they were a kid, and some people end up pivoting a little bit. Like for me, I always liked business, I always liked art, etc., and I wasn't sure how I was going to apply that. I also was big into food and cooked a lot of my own meals as a kid just for fun because I liked doing it. But anyway, so I thought like maybe I'd go into culinary arts, or maybe I'd be an architect, or
Nice.
maybe I'd be go into like marketing, advertising, or something like that. And when I don't think I got as far along in the journey as you did. I didn't do like internships or anything like that, or career fairs to see where those paths might lead, but just kind of envisioning those careers and what I knew about them. I was picturing myself being, me now working full time in those careers. And I realized that for architecture, I was like, I don't know if I want to be working on projects that take me 10 years or 20 years to complete.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I want to work in a field where it takes me 10 or 15 years or whatever to be able to sign off on my own projects. And then for
Mm,
culinary arts, I knew that those environments were pretty hard on your body and exhausting, and like kind of toxic work cultures often in the back of a kitchen, and really hard to like break through in that scene. But then there was this graphic design marketing where I'm like, oh, I get to use art, I get to use business, I get to like apply it in whatever way I want. And there's more freedom, and you can like do
yeah.
short projects or long projects or whatever else. So I ended up kind of
Yeah.
getting drawn down this path. I didn't know graphic design existed, but I thought like something in creativity and business. And then like the picture started forming a little bit more. So I love the idea, or the fact that you
Totally.
were able to like, you didn't have to go work as an engineer for 10 years before you decided that wasn't for you. You found it before you got
Yeah.
down that path.
Yeah. Thank goodness. Saved a lot of time.
Absolutely. Cool. So how was the AmeriCorps experience? I've known a couple people that went through it, but what did you think of it overall?
I had a really positive experience with it. There were some, I mean, there's always going to be hard challenges in any job or any experience. I think the biggest issue I had was just that all of these schools are under resourced, which is why we are placed in these schools. And so they're already um, having a tough time just with the basics. There's a lot of things going on, not just in the school, but in the community. And so when you're coming in and you have all this energy and you want to teach kids how to do algebra, like they have other things that are on their plate that they're thinking about. And so it's really important to kind of think about what is the actual goal here. Are you trying to, I don't know, make things the way that you want them to go, or do you want to help these students with what they need help with? So really just meeting people where they're at and moving forward from there. So overall, a really awesome experience. I loved having to um, adapt my teaching style to several different students at the same time. So what we did was we took students out of class in small groups to help kind of supplement what they were learning in class. And so if they were learning, like we're learning basics of algebra today, but these kids are a little bit behind on this specific piece, like let's focus on this specific piece so that they can kind of catch up. And even within that small group, there are still diversity in what they understand. And so you have to make sure that each student is understanding what you're trying to teach them and then accelerate them all together. And so you have to constantly adapt how you're teaching something, how you're explaining, how you're making sure you're checking for understanding. And so that challenge to me takes a lot of energy and creativity and patience. And I just love that kind of challenge.
That's cool. I've never been a teacher per se. I've led some workshops or something, but I wouldn't consider that
Yeah.
fully teaching. But what you just described kind of reminds me of being a manager, which
Yeah.
don't have any formal training in management. But one of the first things I learned after managing multiple people was, wow, everyone needs a different style of management. Everyone is
Yes.
motivated by different things, or I'm sure there's some clusters of groups of different types of people that are motivated by certain things or whatever. But when you're a small team, you notice that each team member needs a different approach to managing them. So
Yeah.
it is kind of interesting / fun to try to figure out what makes each person tick. But for
Right.
some, I imagine it can also be frustrating where they're like, I just want to teach this thing and I've already
D-
designed this curriculum,
yeah.
and why do I have to like teach it 10 different ways?
Exactly.
That's cool. It sounds
Totally.
like it was a great experience. So from teaching in AmeriCorps to in the engineering background to sustainability and zero waste, like where did that switch come in? Like,
Yeah. honestly, when I give people my resume and you looked at my LinkedIn, it just feels random and chaotic, which is kind of fun for me. But it all has this very like clear through line in hindsight. And so um, I went from AmeriCorps. It's just a 1 year program, an optional second year, but I only did it for 1 year. I moved from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to Madison, Wisconsin because my partner was living there and I wanted to move closer. And I found that I wanted to go back into engineering at that point, just try it out. And so I found kind of like a good middle ground, working as a project engineer at a commercial construction company called Findorf, based in Madison, but works all over. And it kind of combined my excitement for learning new things. I love just being thrown in a situation and having to figure it out. So I had a lot of that. I had a lot of just being organized and managing projects, being a project engineer. So that's kind of an innate capability of mine. So I love doing that. And then kind of bringing in the engineering side with having to figure out like how things are put together and solving problems and all that kind of stuff. And so being in construction helped me bring together all of my kind of learned skills in school and help me apply them. And it was in this job that I learned about the term zero waste and the zero waste movement. And so I kind of, all of the things kind of happened at the right time where I had financial sustainability. I had my own like financial goals. I was finally abundant in that area. I had the time and the space to make my own purchasing choices in a different way than I had working for AmeriCorps on a very small like volunteer stipend. So I was learning all these things about zero waste. And as I was learning them, all of these like connections were clicking in my head because I had always been interested in sustainability as a kid. But we just never really called it sustainability in my household. We just kind of
Okay.
did these things. So yeah, so my family were from Nigeria. So first generation Nigerian American. And a lot of the things I was learning about zero waste and sustainability as an adult were things that I was already doing as a kid, but I was just putting a name to them. So like as a kid, I remember having to bring back my little Ziploc sandwich baggie from school every day. We would wash it, dry it up, and then use it the next day. And so that in itself is a zero waste action, but we just never called it that, you know? So I was learning about zero waste. I was finally able to make my own decisions. And I was like, oh, I can really design my life to live more sustainably in a way that's really intentional. And I started going down that path. And so I was learning about zero waste. I was trying to facilitate it in my life in this construction job that I was working. And it was like a few months into it, I realized that I am breaking my back to do all of these sustainable things because the world is just not set up in a way to make this easy for me. So I was going to different grocery stores. I was going to all these specialty shops. I was running around the city to like find all of these secret spots to do my zero waste behaviors. And I realized that I should probably divert my energy into something that's a little bit more helpful because even if I manage to produce zero waste on my own or in my household, that's great. I think that was a really helpful thing to do on an individual level, but there's so much more that could be done. And there's so much waste that we don't see that's behind the scenes. And so it was through my curiosity, my honestly, my nosiness of just like asking questions of my favorite, like poke shop and coffee shop. Like, can I bring my own mug? Like, what are the rules? Like, why don't you let everyone bring their own mug? And just kind of nudging and asking that I realized that people in general want to do the right thing. They want to be sustainable, but there are so many things that we don't see that keep people from doing that. And so that's when I realized that there was space for not only me learning, but other people learning how to figure this out together.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah. One thing that sparked there for me was your kind of home life being sustainable without calling
Yeah.
it that, because I feel like that's where some of my initial passion for food and sustainability came from, is just being around my grandmother who grew up during the Great Depression a lot and had a garden and made most of her own food
Yeah.
and preserved stuff or froze it or whatever she needed to get the most out of everything she was making, and
Hmm.
that kind of lifestyle like rubbed off on me a little bit without me noticing it. But it's not like she was saying, "Oh, we gotta all grow our own food and have these gardens
Right.
and don't waste anything." It's not like she was. It
Yeah.
was just built into her growing up poor on a farm in Nebraska during the Great Depression. Like it's just
Hmm.
kind of some of those habits that you build. But it also kind of makes me think of whenever people are talking about how organic food is new and interesting and the future or whatever. I always say no,
Hmm.
it's actually just the past. We just forgot it for a few
Yeah.
decades. That's it. Like it's
Yep.
how every living creature on the planet has lived for since the beginning of time until like the 1940s or 50s or something, and then
Yep.
everything changed and we completely forgot like overnight how to live sustainably and how to eat organic and do different things like that. So I love that you brought that up, that it was just
Absolutely.
kind of the way you were doing things. You just didn't have a word for it.
Yeah, and that's the key for what I'm trying to do with my work is um, not make sustainability anything exceptional. I feel like right now sustainability is kind of like a gold standard. People want to be sustainable, and my goal is that it's actually very ubiquitous and it's not special at all because we just all do it by nature. And so that's kind of what I hope we can build towards, that it's not just something that a few people can manage to figure out, but just we build our society in a way that everyone can just do it that way, like you just
Yeah.
said.
I also love that you talked about, the individual actions are great and important. If everyone did what you were
Hmm.
doing, we probably wouldn't have as many problems. But to your point,
Right.
there's like a whole supply chain of decisions being made and actions being taken that happen before you ever see a product on a
Yes.
shelf or
Hmm.
whatever. And then there's a whole supply chain or waste chain and circular economy, hopefully, kind of stuff that happens after it leaves your hands that you have, and on both sides of the coin, like consumers have little to no control other than
Right.
voting or like using their voice to kind of move change forward. So by you kind of moving into working more on the system instead of being like a good part of that system, you can make so
Hmm.
much bigger impact. I love
Right.
that
And I
kind of
think I
philosophy.
think it's a both scenario too. It's not one or the other. But I put 80% of my energy into the systems and 20 into the individual. And I think that's a better balance than trying to all do it by myself.
And do you think that mentality has kind of helped you have a little more forgiveness in your own lifestyle when you do have waste creep
A
in?
100%, 100%. That's something I see a lot, and I'm sure you've heard it too with people you meet when you say that you work in sustainability or sustainability adjacent projects, and people say, "Oh my gosh, let me tell you all the things I did bad this week or this month," and then you kind of become this like guilt sponge of people that feel bad for making decisions that were the best decisions they could at the time, and I try to be like, I am not judging a decision you make, but if you want to change this, here are some options to try. It's never you're a bad person for making trash because sometimes you can't avoid it. But if you want to find ways around it, or if you want to figure out how to build a structure in your workplace and your family that you can, I'm here to help you try and figure that out.
That's cool. Yeah, it's like most of my adult life I've lived in tiny apartments and no car and like just
Mm,
lived as sustainably as I possibly could. But during the pandemic, we were like, okay, mortgage rates look nice, and maybe
mm,
if we get in now, we might actually be able to afford something in the Northwest because prices are
yeah,
crazy. So we jumped in, but the
yeah.
only thing we could find that was like in our price range and wasn't a super competitive bidding situation was this 4-bedroom house in Olympia, and it's like
Oh
way more
wow.
house than we would have ever wanted, and I feel super guilty about the energy it takes to like heat it or cool it or whatever, but I tell myself that we're offsetting the energy, and Washington's relatively renewable energy, and we got the business carbon neutral certified so that we're not only kind of like offsetting this house but other employees' houses, or at least a
Yeah,
portion that they use for business and stuff. But anyway, so I tell myself, okay, well, the fact that you work in
yeah,
sustainability and try to drive the world forward, and the fact that you offset this, makes it sort of okay, but still that kind of like
yeah.
there's this like guilt inside of me that makes me
Yeah,
feel like
I
I just
mean,
need to move into a yurt in New Mexico or something.
but there's no perfect, right? Like you just said that, like I still make plenty of trash that I wish I didn't have to. And so it's just realizing that there is no perfect with this. It's just moving forward with the intention of trying your best as much as you possibly can. And that's honestly all you can ask for with anything. So
yeah, I've gotten to the point where I don't have complete panic attacks when I have to throw something in the
okay.
trash anymore. So that's good.
Good.
But it's one of those things that it's once you see it, it's hard to unsee, right? Like once you know the
Yeah.
system and once you like, I was literally just looking at something the other day that I was holding in my hand and I was like, man, this thing's going to live longer than me and longer than anyone I know and anyone they know and anyone they know. And here I
Yeah.
am just like using it once or twice or whatever. And then
Yeah.
it's done. Like this world that we live in is just crazy. Like how did we get to this
Hmm.
point? But again, like
Yeah.
you said, it's progress over perfection. Like do what you can right now, make the best choices you can and try to, if you can, anyone out there listening, try to dedicate some of your professional life to making this change and to helping the world transition. And then, you can have a
Hmm.
little forgiveness for a little waste in your own life.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for going down that rabbit. I also, when you were talking about your background there, I totally forgot that we had that Madison overlap because that's where actually I started. Modern Species was in Madison, and my then wife at the time was working at Ideal Builders. So who knows? Maybe there was actually
Oh,
some overlap.
possibly actually. I love that.
Yeah, that's cool. Awesome. So you got your passion for zero waste, and then at some point down the line, you decided to launch your own consulting business. Like, where and how did that
Yeah.
decision come to be?
Yeah. So after about, I would say like a year and a half, 2 years of trying it on my own and just being curious, in that time, I started a blog, which was kind of my informational interviews of local businesses, trying to just figure out what was going on and how to kind of work with them, to figure out just for myself, for my own purposes. And then I started realizing like, I really want to do this more. I want to help dedicate my time to just figuring these problems out. And so I decided to join my company's green team. We had a really small green team that was doing like Earth Day events and like beach cleanups, which was really wonderful. And I was like, this is a good way to kind of see how we can enact change in a
That's
company
cool.
from an employee level. Yeah. So I was very lucky to be able to just I just bothered the person in charge of our green team and said, can I just come to your meetings? I just want to talk about sustainability with people. And so I joined that and kind of helped some events, and I actually helped start a company garden. And it was very,
Wow. Super cool.
kind of random for a construction company, but people had said they wanted it, and it really aligned with the company's goals of like encouraging healthy living, healthy eating. And so I was like, this is perfect. You're already supportive of this. Let me just do all of the hard work of managing it. So I got to budget for a garden and I got to have a garden at work. And so it was a win-win for me. But kind of those are kind of like the fun individual benefits I got, but I really was interested in how can we actually think about waste at a big scale, like a construction company, so much waste happening from rework and just demolition. Like there's so many pieces that just we are constantly hemorrhaging waste. And I was thinking about all of the industries, not just construction, that have so much waste on the back end that we just don't know about because it's happening on the back end. And so that's when I started realizing that I needed to switch career paths, that I wasn't going to be able to do the work I wanted to do at that job. And so I started looking elsewhere all over the country. Are there any jobs that do what I'm imagining, what I'm thinking about all the time? And I couldn't find any. I couldn't find any jobs that focused on zero waste specifically, focused specifically on small businesses and in a way that I wanted to do it that wasn't like regulation focused or policy focused, which is all interesting and important, but not what I wanted to do at the time. And so because I couldn't find anything, I decided to just daydream about what it would look like to have that ideal job and what I would need to get there, and kind of reverse engineered my dream job. So I couldn't find it, and I realized I had to just build it myself. And that's when I started taking more classes outside of my work. I got a couple of certifications in sustainable business and then the True Zero Waste rating system, started networking, started taking business classes. So I just kind of had this side hobby outside of my job that transitioned me into being able to open up Blue Daisi a few years later.
That's cool. We have similar stories there. Is when I
Nice.
decided somewhat knew what I wanted to do, which was use my design skills in a more responsible way, try to help companies that I actually wanted to exist and that I was passionate about. Like those kind of seeds were being planted. And when I got back to the US after some travels and landed in Madison, and I was like looking around for like,
Mm-hmm.
well, where could I work? There were some really cool design studios there, but none of them were truly focusing on anything I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I just, like you said, took some business classes, started networking, started like hanging up my shingle, so to speak, doing some freelance work. But I think it,
Yeah.
started at the right time when the economy was kind of in the gutter and people were looking for more affordable design talent than the expensive
Yeah.
agencies in town. So we got some great initial work and really connected with the kind of buy local movement team or people or any sustainability oriented folks there, and it just kind of took off like quicker than expected. So we had to
That's
start figuring out how to make it
awesome.
a company, and that's when my then wife at the time joined and became a partner in the company, so we could kind of figure out what we wanted to do with it, and then we rebranded to Modern Species and eventually ended up moving out this way. But
Yeah, I love that. It's very similar.
yeah, I love that some businesses get started intentionally. Like it's, you know what, I have this dream for a business and I think it's scalable, I think it's investable, or whatever their goals are. And then there are some people who
Yeah.
are like, I can't find the job that I want, so I'm just going to create it.
Yeah. Right. I really want to solve this problem, and I have to create it myself. And yeah, sometimes it happens that way.
Awesome. That's cool. So do you have, now you're doing the Blue Daisy Consulting thing, can you give us some examples of how you've been helping some of your clients?
Yeah. So I do several different things. It kind of comes from the teaching in me that I want to meet people where they're at. And so my work looks different almost every single client, but there are some consistencies. And so my favorite thing working with the client is people either say, I've never thought of things that way, like, thank you for changing my perspective. Or I feel like I can really do this now. Like zero waste sustainability doesn't feel impossible anymore. I feel like I can do it. And so that's usually my goal with almost all of my clients. And so one example of like a really small project was I worked with this like subscription box company. They focus on Black owned businesses, and they send like really cute goodies across the country. And so their owner reached out to me and just asked, like, I want to do zero waste. Like, I want to figure it out, but I just don't know how. And so we kind of walked through all the different pieces of what's important to her, what are her goals, what are her values. And obviously, like, Black owned businesses, supporting them is important to her. Finding ways to kind of bring joy to people with these gifts and these products is really important to her. And so figuring out ways to infuse zero waste into that. And so some like really simple changes that she made just from our conversation, it was like one of my coaching offerings. So it's very much like an ideation session. And so she decided to switch from monthly boxes to quarterly so that she could really focus in on like getting the best products she had and not switching things up every month, just being very intentional about what she was sending out. So she switched from monthly to quarterly. We talked about encouraging her vendors to think about sustainability and like kind of taking that down the supply chain. So she would kind of mention that she wants sustainable products and sustainable packaging. So kind of inspiring others to do the same. We talked about her packaging and her shipping practices themselves. And so one of my favorite ideas that she came up with was that she was frustrated that you just get a box and then you recycle it, right? So either find a way to make it more of like a longer experience. And so she thought, and I'm not sure if she's implemented it yet, but it's definitely on her list to add like a coloring page on the inside of the box so that it's actually a piece of art that you can spend time with and enjoy. And it's like a Black artist that creates something that you can enjoy. So just adding layers to the product that it's really thinking about every single piece that you've included in this has a purpose and is not just like something that you toss out after a few minutes, but like really thinking about it. So she was like, oh my God, I love all these ideas. Like, it's just, you made it so simple. Like, it's just these little things that I can do. And it's the fun stuff, but it's also the technical stuff of like once you've made all these changes, how do you communicate them to your clients so that they know what to do on their end? So we talked about adding like a QR code or a little piece of paper that explains how to recycle or dispose of every single thing in the box. Like all of these things, just these ideas that you don't think about when you just want to sell a product or get something out the door. It's really going through all the intention of it. So those are kind of my favorite clients, of just getting all those ideas out there that feel aligned with the business owner or whoever's running the project. And then on the other hand, on a larger scale business, I'm working with a global pet food company that is pursuing true zero waste certification in their facilities. And that's a certification that I have. And what they hired me to do is really help create a culture of sustainability within their employees. So while they are pursuing certification in their facilities and their employees are working at home, they wanted to really inspire people to think about zero waste and sustainability on a regular basis so that it's not jarring when they come back to the office and everything's changed. And so what we're doing is just all kinds of things, but like workshops and challenges and making a leaderboard that you can kind of compete between departments and between countries, and make people excited about changing little things about their lives so that when they come back to the office, it's just like, oh yeah, we're used to this. It's a very smooth transition. So I think those are like kind of the two extremes of things that I do, but all with the purpose of making it really easy and effortless for zero waste to just be a thing.
Oh, those are fun examples. I know that you were doing some work on culture of sustainability, but I was curious to hear how you were doing that. So that sounds amazing,
Yeah.
like using the power of gamification and making it
Yep.
interesting, like educating people without them knowing they're being educated, because it just seems like a fun
Yeah.
challenge or competition, and like getting to see your name up on the leaderboard or, different things like
Mm-hmm.
that is always great. But then it just plants those seeds of like these things are important to us, and starts teaching
Mm-hmm.
some of those skills and starts getting people to look at the right things, pay attention to different things. And even just like companies stating like sustainability is important to us, tell us what you see and how we can improve
Mm-hmm.
it. I think it's powerful because once a company makes a bold statement like by 2030 we're going to be zero waste or whatever, you've
Yep.
now invited all your vendors, all your partners, all your employees, like everyone that sees that statement, you've invited them to participate in that,
Mm-hmm.
like by offering up ideas or finding ways that you can improve or making the right connections or anything else. So I feel like that's super important, is just planting your flag, so to speak, so other people know how
Mm-hmm.
to participate in it.
100%. And the best part too with that last example of creating a culture of sustainability is that since they, like the employees of the company, are the experts in what they do, now that they are thinking in this way, they can create products and solutions within the company that are of this mindset. So I'm not solving every single company, every challenge that the company has, but now not the whole company, but the whole company has people in there who are thinking this way and who can advocate for sustainability in their different aspects. So whatever they're working on, we're thinking about this on a regular basis, and it's not just like this other department or siloed thing. It's everyone's thinking about this, which makes for better solutions in the long run.
Yeah, so for a program like that, is it like you come in, you do these activities for a few months and then you go away, and then like they need to somehow maintain it, or it just disappears and they hope that employees are now on the train and they can move that
Right.
forward? Or do you do that for years, like just keep coming back each quarter with a different challenge?
Yeah, well, this specific client, we're on our second year, so it's going to be at least a 2-year project. I've had ones that are 3 months long, 6 months long, so it really just depends on what they need. Sometimes it's just a one-off workshop just to get people thinking, but I really just want it to be what they need. And so if they tell me we need you for months and months to kind of keep this going, then I'm willing to do that. If we only need you for an hour to kind of get people thinking, then that's great too. So just again,
Okay.
meeting people where they're at.
So they can start small and then scale from there if they
Yeah,
need to. But yeah, for
absolutely.
a little bit, I always have two more ideas than time. But one of my thoughts was that a agency that helped design company culture would
Mm-hmm.
be a great benefit to the world and to companies, like especially when companies are merging or trying to make changes, like shift into sustainability. Like there's a lot of you need to bring the people along with you to some degree. And whenever I've mapped that process out, it ends up being like a 2 or 3 year journey. So I think sometimes like those longer term engagements will be necessary, whether that's you doing it or training the trainer, like training their staff to like carry that through. But I think that's great that you offer that service. And then you also touched on the other case study where you were helping kind of come up with more creative ideas to reduce waste. But then you touched on that communication side of things, whether it's communicating with your customers, consumers, other partners, vendors, whatever. And I feel like that's an often overlooked area because companies are like, well, we did our part, we sourced from better materials and then we manufactured it sustainably and we made sure it was recyclable or whatever. And then they send it out into the world and whoops, like we didn't communicate how to recycle it or what to do with it or what not to do with it, et cetera. And then almost none of it actually gets recycled. Right. So I always call that like recyclable in theory. I'm putting air quotes up on there because unless you do that last part of telling people clearly what to do with it and making sure they can do it easily, then it's only recyclable in theory. And it's almost greenwashing at that point because even if, you did your part to make sure the materials are recyclable, if you don't do the last part and it doesn't get recycled, then it's not recyclable.
Yeah, and I call that greenwashing on accident because consumers have become so perceptive to greenwashing that from their view, it is greenwashing. You said it was this and I can't figure this out, so therefore you're telling me something that's misleading, and that's why people can get into trouble, which is why I really make it clear that let's think through this. So I'll give one more example of just a general example of a client that I worked with where they wanted to change their packaging. And so they wanted it to be more sustainable, and they were using single-use plastic film bags. And so we went through their question of what are your goals? Where are you selling? Where are you sending these materials? Like, let's think about all of these things before we come up with a solution. Because if it was just me, like engineering mind, I'm not a designer. So recyclable paper box, that's easy thing to do. That's not plastic. You can switch it to something that's a little bit more sustainable. But in asking these questions, we realized that it was important that it was clear and that we could actually see the product. It was important that it was durable because she was shipping X, Y, and Z. It was important that it had these dimensions because of the shelving space that she sold. So there were all of these constraints that you had to think about. And one of the things we talked about was thinking about if you want to make it compostable, home compostable or industrial compostable, because it depends on where it's going, if that's even an option. And so we found out that it was important that it was industrially compostable, or else it would, in the place that she was selling it, mostly in the Seattle area, then you could actually compost it. So going through all of those steps to figure out where is this going, who is using it, how does your assembly system work, like all of the constraints before coming up with a solution, because then it actually will work rather than just like trying to make it up without thinking through all those things.
Yeah, totally. There's, I'm forgetting who it was. Maybe it was Seventh Generation, which is a great company that's doing lots of good stuff. But they launched this paper pulp, molded pulp container for like detergent, like laundry detergent or something like that. And then it had just like this plastic bag on the inside, but the rigidity was made through the paper pulp instead of through plastic. So their argument was, this is less plastic, which is great, right? That is true. Reducing the amount of plastic is awesome. And then the outside part, the paper pulp part, was recyclable, like easily recyclable. The trick was that you had to let consumers know they need to separate those two things.
Yes.
And very clearly. Otherwise, once it gets into the material recovery stream, people at the plants see it as a mixed material kind of thing that could be full of detergent or other kind of stuff that could mess up the whole process. So they just pick it up, like if they see it running through the line, they pick it up and throw it in landfill like pile. So it's one of those things that was like great idea. And probably like I still don't know if like the plastic liner or whatever is the way to go. Maybe there's another solution, but great idea, good starting point. But they failed on the communication side, and then I don't even know if I'd have to look to see if they still have those in the market, but I think it kind of failed. It was like a backfired. Like it went from being a container that was recyclable in some places already,
To
like
no
with
one.
rigid plastic, to basically being something that was technically recyclable, but just didn't get recycled. And so
Yep.
it's those kind of whoopsies that like sometimes you have these unintended consequences if you're not thinking of everything from upstream to midstream to downstream. If you're
Hmm.
only solving for one of those areas, there's a really good chance that it's not going to work in the other parts of the material stream, and then you're going to like do more harm than good.
Exactly. And all of those insights come from just, again, on a personal level, seeing a company say that they do something and then getting the product and being frustrated. It's like, if you had just put a line on your website or a card in the package, then it wouldn't have been a problem. So it's just experiencing, and that makes me think about those things.
Nice. Yeah. So I know you do this consulting work, and part of that probably is teaching. But to bring it full circle back on the
Yeah.
AmeriCorps and your kind of love of teaching, I know you also have courses. I believe one
Hmm.
of your courses, maybe you even got a government, like a Seattle, city of Seattle or something like that, grant to give that course out for free or something. Can you talk about both your course
Yeah.
and talk about how to like go get funding to do some of these initiatives?
Sure. So I'll start with the funding. That was a grant from the Seattle Public Utilities. They have this thing called the Waste Free Communities Grant, and the next one will be open in 2023. So still a while off. But when I had applied, um, I was wanting to give away my services to small businesses for free, because one of the biggest barriers is that, sure, zero waste sounds great, but I don't have time, I don't have budget. Like, there's so many constraints that keep people from doing what they want to do. So I wanted to find a way to make it just impossibly easy for people to engage. It didn't work out as great as I thought because it was right in the middle of the pandemic. So there were some other barriers, but what I did get to do is offer a introductory workshop for about zero waste for small businesses for free to the business owner. I got to do waste audits for free. So I got to come into the business, actually analyze and sort their
Nice.
waste and give them like a report out of what was going well and what wasn't. And then have a ideation session like the one I mentioned before, where we talk about, here are some ideas that you could possibly implement over time at your pace, and then let them go off. And so I got to do that for about a dozen businesses over the past year, which led to a full contract with the city. And so now I can
Oh,
get to continue doing that, yeah, for about the next year or so, doing outreach in Seattle to small businesses, basically the same thing. And so, it was just really awesome that I found that grant. It gave me just enough space to kind of experiment and perfect my process, and then I could kind of go forward and offer it for the next year. So that was really awesome. There are in the works a bunch of other grants for zero waste and circular economy. So depending on when people see this podcast, there are the RePlus initiative in King County to get circular businesses kind of off the ground. And then the next cycle, which is another kind of loosely connected but separate grant process to get funding for businesses that want to kind of create circular solutions. So there's a lot of funding coming down the pipeline for zero waste, which is really, really exciting.
that's cool. And before we dive into the teaching, I want to ask a follow-up question
Yeah,
there is, so I don't know if everyone knows how to, go after some of these opportunities like grants, for
yeah.
example. Like I'm new to it myself. I've won a couple grants for nonprofit clients,
Mm,
kind of like pitching it together so that they can have money to produce whatever we're working on together with them. But I have yet to like go after grants for my for-profit
mm,
business, my agency. But I feel like
yeah.
we are a B Corp. We're all about sustainability and impact. There's probably some opportunities out there to get grants so that we can do our work either more accessibly, or for when there's not like a clear client, but we could benefit lots of people or something like that. So
Yeah.
going through that process, did you find, because I think you're also a for-profit business, I assume,
Yes.
but were there barriers to that? Did you have to find like a nonprofit partner, or how does that work in terms of
No,
applying
I
for
actually
funding?
didn't. They actually were accepting for-profit businesses, which was great. But I know that's not a common occurrence. So I think I just got lucky with that one.
Nice. Okay.
And I think it's a lot easier too for product-based businesses to find the accelerator grants and kind of startup grants. So I think I actually just really got lucky to stumble upon this one opportunity to get me kind of what I was trying to do. So yeah, I'm still new at it as well.
Okay. Yeah, I've been talking to some departments of agriculture, for example, so that I have this
Mm,
knowledge for clients because we work a lot in food. And they do lots of grants that companies don't know about. If you're exporting
mm,
product, like agricultural product or whatever, from one state to another, or especially if you're exporting from one country to another, there's
mm.
often opportunity like grants and other kind of funding and different things like that available to you to help you do that because it
Wow.
grows the economy locally. So I've been hearing about things like that. I know there's some of my clients are well funded through foundation work that are often
Mm,
multi-year kind of grant opportunities to fund work in areas that would otherwise not have great access to money to be able to pull it off. And
yeah.
then the grants that I've won, like one of them was through a paper company called Sappy, who does this Sappy Ideas That Matter grant, where you, as a designer, can apply to fund the production and some of the other pieces of the project that you're working on for a cause, like a nonprofit or something like that. It's a pretty cool program.
Yeah.
They do it once a year, and then I'm part of this organization called RSA, which is, I think the full name is like the Royal Society of Arts and Manufacturing or something like that. But it's this like
Yeah.
250-year-old organization out of the
Oh, wow.
UK. I think even like Benjamin Franklin or something was a member of it at one
Oh,
point. But
very
so
cool.
like it's been around for a long time, but it's all this idea of using like arts and manufacturing for good. At least that's the way I
Mm,
understand it. But they have a grant program as well called the Catalyst Grant. So they have a couple priorities like around the future of work or resilient, regenerative kind of systems. So through that, we won a grant for one of our clients to produce, to grow their certification program and produce membership
mm,
growth materials and streamline the process, et cetera. But those grants like had to go, the money goes to the nonprofit. But I know
right.
there's just all this world of opportunities and even economic development. Often most cities or states have an Office of Economic Development, and you can get grants to bring on new employees that you
Yeah.
train in your field so that they have better job prospects in the future, for example. So
Yep.
like there's so many different places to look.
They're out there.
I just wish it was easier for people to tap
Yeah.
into it, right? Because from what I hear from people who
Same.
know this world, they're like, there's gobs and gobs of money out there. People just don't know how to go get it. So maybe I need to
100%.
find an expert on
I
on
think I
winning
think we all
grants to
do.
get them on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool. Okay, so now flipping back to the teaching. So part of what you're
Yeah.
doing now is building out courses. I imagine partly to just have an accessible offering for folks who can't necessarily afford your one-on-one consulting, but maybe also just like
Yeah.
to scale your knowledge and create other opportunities to do more. But tell
Yeah,
us what you're
yeah.
doing there.
Absolutely. So I just a few months ago I released a course called Road to Zero Waste, and that was very much inspired by me hearing a lot of the same questions over and over, and also wanting to have deeper conversations about zero waste. Because oftentimes we kind of get stuck on the perfectionism of it and the individualism of it that we don't really think about the bigger picture. And so I wanted to create a space to do that and to have those conversations. And so basically, I walk people through my journey, the journey that I take my clients through. And I also bring in 5 guest experts to kind of talk about zero waste in a different way. And so we talk about zero waste from the perspective of anti-racism and how diversity, equity, inclusion work is the same work as sustainability work. It's just coming at it from a different angle. We talk about it from a storytelling lens, how to inspire others to kind of do what you're doing. We talk about it from a financial lens and thinking about how to advocate for what you need in your space, whether it's financial compensation, financial resources, whether it's anything, really how to just advocate for yourself, pitching and negotiating, how those are helpful skills in building a more sustainable world. And it's just, it's kind of just what I wish everyone knew when they were starting to work with me. So I just made it into a thing and just give it off as a package.
Oh, that's
so
cool. Yeah.
so I'm really proud of it. It's one of the coolest things I've built because it's not only just like a class that I've taught, but there's exercises and activities. I have a playlist in there. There's games and resources. So it's just making it fun and engaging to work through and just kind of take people on this journey so that they can simmer on these ideas rather than trying to just stress out about how to do it perfectly from the get-go.
Wow, that's really, I've been thinking about doing some courses because kind of like you, I'd love to help small companies or help many more people, but I only have so much time and, we, have to pay our bills, so we can't always work for free, but we work for free way more than we should probably through our 1% for the planet commitment and other things. But with that said, yeah, I love the idea of like scaling some of that knowledge through courses. But what I hadn't thought of is what you just described to some degree, is like giving them the information that would be useful to have before you work with them. So it could even be like a part of an onboarding tool. So like the primer before they start doing some of their zero waste or sustainability work. I love that kind of angle too. So is this your first dab or your only course that you plan on creating, or are you thinking about building out a lot of different curriculum for people?
This is it for now. It's kind of what it really is I have a goal of just, I don't want to be doing this work forever. I think I love it and it's important, but I want to continue to evolve. And so what I did with this course is just download my entire thought process so that if someone else took this course, they have everything that I know about it, about zero waste, and they can take it off on their own way. So they don't necessarily have to hire me. They have the way that I think right there. And so, just this course for now, but I'm sure I'm going to have other ideas in the future. But right now, it's just, that was an important thing for me to do at this point in my career.
Love it. Yeah, that makes sense. So speaking of evolving, what does the future look like for Blue Daisi?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm actually currently working with a leadership coach to help me really define that. But right now, it's just kind of following what's interesting to me. I've been doing this for a little bit over 3 years now, and so I know what works and what doesn't work. And right now I'm in the phase of, I know what works, what doesn't work, what will make me money, but I want to know what am I really, really excited to do, and kind of niche down into that. And so I'm in the process of figuring out, what do I just light up when I do, which is a lot of teaching, which is a lot of one-on-one work, clients who are really excited about not just the top-down sustainability, but the bottom-up, and letting their employees kind of guide that. That really excites me. So just kind of figuring out how to communicate that and find the people that want to engage with that work. So yeah, I'm in the process of figuring that out.
Nice. And as a fellow business owner, I know that's always a constant process.
It's a process.
I feel like every year, every quarter, whatever brings a new challenge. And as usually the type of person that starts a business is the type who loves a good challenge and likes to continue growing, right? So this idea of constant evolution is kind of baked into modern species and evolved CPG and all these kind of things. So I totally get that you're always like looking for that next bigger and better way to make an impact as well, not only for your clients, but for the world and maybe even yourself, right? Because as a creative person, at least, like doing the same thing over and over and over again will burn you out.
Tough.
So like having a new challenge, a new problem to solve is great. So like having the courses that teaches all the things that you did in this realm or whatever is packaged and cataloged and it's ready out there. People can learn it. People can do it themselves. And then you can shift your focus into like whatever the next thing is, probably.
Exactly.
So probably on a similar path, but maybe doing something slightly different. So that's cool. I mean, that's part of like this whole evolved CPG community as well, is because I've been doing the services side, the brand consulting design work for close to 2 decades and running Modern Species for over 13 years. But like, I wanted to be able to do more, make bigger impact, more impact. And I thought like, if I don't have to do it all myself, I can connect brilliant people like you with the world, and I can connect these people together who are doing amazing things and see what magic comes out of it, or pull courses like yours or others into this community, so they're all accessible and easy to find, so people can like build upon their knowledge and then maybe connect people to collaborate and whatever else. So I've done a lot of community building work, and I'm just kind of shifting it into this sustainable business or better for the world product space, but I love always evolving, so,
Mm-hmm.
so I feel you there.
Yeah.
So maybe to kind of wrap up this conversation, and it's probably all in your course, so maybe the answer is go to the course, but what's some advice for companies that are just kind of getting started on their sustainability journey?
Yeah, I won't put you the course. I can happily share. I would say, so 3 things come to mind, and I think they sum up the whole, what I'm trying to do. And so I think the first thing is to get really clear about what you mean by sustainability for you. And that will vary from business to business, from industry to industry, from person to person. And so when we say, I want to be more sustainable, I want to do better for the world and the planet, what does that actually mean specifically? Like, what problems are you noticing that you want to address? So specificity is really important to feeling like you're actually making a difference. I would say from there, if zero waste is part of that definition, to just really observe and to notice not only what trash you're making, like when you're noticing yourself making a lot of trash, but why it happened in the first place, and really getting inquisitive and curious about it. Maybe it's because you had a busy week and you were rushing a lot and you just needed to get a lot of takeout or packaged goods to get through the week, and that happens and we forgive ourselves. But maybe it's because there is no better option where you are. So it's figuring out what is that better option. So I would just say notice and observe before we try and think of solutions. And then I would say the last thing to kind of at least help with that guilt and that shame that happens when we make mistakes is to move forward with a calm sense of urgency. So we know there's kind of a clock in the back of our heads of we need to really take serious climate action, but we can't physically do it all at once. And so just being calm but urgent about it and continuing to move forward without having panic attacks on a daily basis because it's not happening fast enough. So I get it. I get in those modes too, but it's also important to be patient as we move forward.
Yeah, I feel like the progress over perfection kind of mentality keeps popping up in lots of conversations. And I think it's partly because there is no perfect solution that exists yet for any sustainability, but we're working there and working to get there. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is a weird expression, but like don't give up on the good things just because it's not perfect yet. So like just keep moving forward. Keep doing what you can do. I love that tip. And then, making it personal to yourself, et cetera, all great advice. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
With that said, I know we're kind of running low on time here, so we'll just go ahead and close out by saying, thanks for doing the work you do and kind of spreading your sustainability knowledge and helping encourage companies to kind of think a little bit more deeply about how they're looking at material streams, as well as helping them come up with a culture around sustainability, because I feel like that's the gift that keeps on giving. Because once you embed that in your company culture, you don't necessarily have to continue driving that change. The team will drive it for you. So I love that work.
Thank
you.
So
thanks for doing what you do, and thanks for sharing some time with us on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Moji or Blue Daisi, go to bluedaisi.com. That's Daisy spelled with an I at the end, DAISI.com. Subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channel for more innovator interviews, expert advice, and leadership discussions. If you like this episode, leave a heart, thumbs up, or review, and share it with your colleagues. As an ever-evolving show, we also love feedback, so send us your thoughts or ideas for who we should talk to next to evolve@modernspecies.com.